It was a Tuesday, just another evening, when I walked in early from work. The house was unnervingly quiet. No sounds of the TV or Sarah moving around in the kitchen, nothing. I called out for her. No answer. I dropped my keys on the counter, trying to shake the uneasy feeling creeping in. Normally, she'd be here, and the house would hum with life. But tonight, it felt different, empty. A silence that pressed on me, thick and heavy. Upstairs, I checked our bedroom first. The bed was neatly made. Clothes she'd worn earlier were scattered across the floor, her book left open on the nightstand. But there was no sign of her. No movement. The bathroom was empty, too. A creeping doubt started to settle in. I considered calling her phone, but something told me I didn't need to. Instead, I stood frozen for a moment, feeling the weight of the silence bear down on me, before heading back downstairs. I paced the living room, my thoughts spiraling, until I heard the door open. She stepped in, her hand still on the doorknob. Her eyes met mine, wide with surprise, but there was something else, something I couldn't quite read. "Hey," she said, almost too casually. "I didn't know you'd be home early. How was work?" The words felt wrong. I opened my mouth to ask where she had been, but my voice caught. Something was already gnawing at me. I forced a breath and asked, "Where were you?" She paused, eyes flicking away. "Just out for a walk." A walk? I didn't buy it. She hadn't said anything about it. And the way she stood there, disheveled, slightly breathless, felt like she was hiding something. But I couldn't prove it, not yet. So I just stood there, feeling that nagging sense of unease grow inside me. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice too light. I nodded, but the tension between us hung thick. Something had shifted, and I felt like I was on the edge of discovering something I wasn't ready for. She smiled, too brightly, like it was a mask. But I could see through it. Whatever she had been doing wasn't a simple walk. And I knew, right then, that I had only scratched the surface. The days after that moment felt off. Not overtly, but in the subtle ways Sarah started pulling away. She still smiled, still laughed at my jokes, but the connection between us felt frayed, like a thread pulling loose from the fabric. It wasn't the walk, though that still lingered in my mind. It was the absence, the way she seemed distant. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something was shifting. We didn't talk about it. Instead, she filled the silence with small talk. Work, friends, the weather. Her answers were quick, distracted. There was no real engagement, no spark. It wasn't like it used to be. Then one night, I came home early and found her at the kitchen table. Her eyes were fixed on her phone, her fingers scrolling aimlessly. She didn't notice me at first, and when she did, she jumped, a flash of panic crossing her face before she masked it with a smile. "Hey," she said, voice too high, too fast. "How was your day?" I studied her for a beat. Something was wrong. "You okay?" "Yeah," she answered quickly, too quickly. "Just tired. Long day." I didn't believe her. There was something in her eyes, something in the way she said it, that didn't fit. But I said nothing, grabbed a water, and pretended everything was fine. But it wasn't. Later that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something from me. Something big. I hated the idea of going through her things, but the doubt was gnawing at me, relentless. So I did it. I started with her bag, checking pockets, rifling through papers. Nothing. A crumpled receipt. A few old receipts. Then I moved to her phone. I shouldn't have, but I unlocked it. I didn't expect to find anything earth-shattering, but I had to check. And there it was, a text thread with a name I didn't recognize. Short messages. Casual. But underneath it, something familiar. A comfort between them that shouldn't have been there. I scrolled more. A hint of something more, flirty, even, stopped me cold. I put the phone down, my hands shaking. I didn't need to know who it was. The message was clear. This wasn't just a friend. I walked away, but the gnawing feeling stayed. Something had shifted, something was being hidden. I didn't know what, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see it. The days that followed were a blur. Every morning, I woke up beside Sarah, and every evening, I went to bed beside her. But there was a distance between us, thick and suffocating. I tried to pretend nothing was wrong, tried to tell myself it was just a phase, a bump in the road. But the unease only deepened. I thought about confronting her, asking her directly about the texts, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. I didn't have proof. Just that gnawing feeling, the way her phone seemed to buzz with messages she didn't want me to see. One night, after dinner, I sat across from her at the table, watching her absently push food around her plate. She wasn't even eating. Her mind was somewhere else. Somewhere I couldn't reach. Sarah. I started, my voice unsteady. Is everything okay? She looked up, startled, like I had caught her off guard. Then she smiled, that same practice smile. Yeah, of course. Why? I didn't say anything for a moment. I wanted to ask about the texts, about the way she was pulling away, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded and forced a smile, pretending I didn't see the small lies stacking up between us. But I wasn't blind. I saw it. Later, as she went upstairs, I found myself pacing the living room, the weight of the secret she was keeping pressing down on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, and I didn't know why. The quiet moments had turned into silent wars, battles fought in the spaces between us, in the way she avoided my gaze, in the way her lips never quite met mine the same way they used to. The next day, I followed her. I told myself it was just to clear my head, to figure out if I was being paranoid, but deep down, I knew. I knew that I had to see it for myself. She didn't notice me at first. I watched from a distance as she walked down the street, her head down, her pace quick. She wasn't heading toward the coffee shop or the park like usual. She kept going, until she turned down a street I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a moment. Maybe this was too much. Maybe I should turn around, go back home. But I didn't. I followed. It was almost surreal, watching her walk ahead of me, the back of her head just within reach. I felt like an intruder, a spy in my own life. But I couldn't stop myself. Finally, she stopped in front of a small house, a place I'd never seen before. She stood there for a moment, then knocked on the door. The door opened, and a man stepped out. I couldn't see his face from where I was standing, but I knew. I knew it was him. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. She was talking to him, her back to me, so I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the way she smiled at him. It was a smile I hadn't seen in months. Soft, genuine, like she hadn't just been pretending for me all this time. She stepped inside without a second glance, the door closing behind her, leaving me standing there in the street, feeling like an outsider in my own life. I didn't know how long I stood there, frozen. The world felt distant, like I was watching someone else's nightmare unfold. Every breath I took felt heavier than the last. I wanted to go up to that door, knock, demand answers, but I couldn't move. Instead, I turned and walked away, each step dragging me further from the person I thought I knew. I didn't know where I went after that. I wandered for hours, until the night swallowed the daylight whole. I tried calling her, tried texting, but I already knew she wouldn't answer. When I finally returned home, I didn't even want to open the door. But I did. She was sitting on the couch, a book in her hands, acting like everything was normal. But the air between us had changed. It felt thick with things unsaid. The lies were suffocating me, and I couldn't breathe. I saw you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes flicked up, then away. Her lips parted as if she was about to speak, but nothing came out. She closed the book, setting it aside with deliberate care, avoiding my gaze like she didn't know how to look at me anymore. Who was that? I asked, the words tumbling out in a rush. Who was he? She flinched, but I wasn't going to back down. Not now. She stopped, the words getting stuck in her throat. She ran a hand through her hair, a nervous gesture. It's not what you think. Then what is it? I demanded. Because I'm done with these games, Sarah. I saw the way you looked at him. I saw the way you didn't even hesitate. She stood up, pacing the room, her eyes darting around like she was searching for an escape. But there was nowhere to hide. It's complicated, she finally said, her voice trembling. You wouldn't understand. I felt my chest tighten. Complicated? You're lying to me, Sarah. This isn't some little misunderstanding. You're seeing someone else. She closed her eyes, her face pale. I'm so sorry. I could feel the weight of those words, but they didn't make it better. They just made it worse. The apology felt empty, like a band-aid on a wound that was too deep to heal. Who is he? I asked again, my voice steady now, even though everything inside me was falling apart. She shook her head, refusing to answer. I didn't push her further. At least, not right then. I couldn't. Instead, I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, and wondered how I had been so blind. But I still didn't know who he was. The silence between us stretched out, thick and suffocating. Sarah sat still, her eyes on the floor, hands clenched in her lap. I couldn't breathe. The answers I needed hung in the air, and yet she stayed silent, avoiding them like she could wish them away. I stood by the window, trying to steady my thoughts. All I could see was the image of her with him, her smile, the way she walked into his house without a second thought. It played over and over in my mind, a loop that I couldn't stop. Finally, I turned back to her. "Who is he?" She flinched, her shoulders rising as if she were trying to protect herself. "You wouldn't understand," she murmured. "Stop saying that," I said, my voice edged with frustration. "If you really want me to understand, then tell me." "I can't," she whispered. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what you're going to keep saying? Complicated? If you really cared, you'd explain. You wouldn't leave me hanging." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't speak. The guilt was written all over her face, but it didn't make the situation better. I wanted the truth. I needed it. "Why? Why did you do this?" I demanded, stepping closer. "Why keep it from me?" She wiped her eyes, struggling for words. "I never wanted this to happen. I didn't know how to fix it." "Then why didn't you stop?" I asked, the bitterness creeping in. "Why let it go on?" She shook her head, unable to answer. I don't know. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." I ran my hands through my hair, pacing the room. "Sorry? That's all you have for me? You've been seeing someone else, and all you can say is sorry?" She looked like she wanted to escape, to run, but she didn't. She just stood there, eyes downcast. "I'll tell you everything, I promise. Just, not now." I stared at her, numb. I didn't know if I could wait, but I had no choice. I had to know the truth. But the one thing that still burned in me was the same. Who was he? And why wouldn't she tell me? The days dragged on, each one heavier than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being slowly suffocated, each breath more difficult than the last. Sarah kept up the pretense of normalcy, but I could feel the tension in the air. Every word, every glance, felt calculated. I hated it. She'd barely spoken to me after that night. Her answers were short, distant. The conversations we had felt like empty rituals, nothing real, nothing honest. And I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know who he was, but every time I tried to ask, her eyes would cloud over, and the walls would go up again. I spent days driving myself mad with questions. I replayed every interaction I had with her, every moment that seemed off, trying to piece together a timeline. But nothing fit. Nothing explained why she'd changed, why she'd thrown everything we had away. And then, one evening, I saw something that made my stomach churn. I was at the grocery store, picking up a few things for dinner, when I ran into an old friend, Matt. We chatted for a few minutes, catching up on work and life in general. As I turned to grab a carton of eggs, I caught sight of someone, familiar in the corner of my eye. I turned quickly, but it was too late. They were already leaving. It was Sarah, and she was with him. My heart stopped. I watched them walk toward the exit, laughing. Sarah's head tilted back, that same genuine smile I had seen before. She looked at him the way she hadn't looked at me in months. The way she used to look at me, before everything fell apart. I could barely breathe, but I couldn't look away. They stopped by the doors, and he leaned in, just enough for me to see that he was saying something. Sarah laughed, and I felt a sharp pang in my chest. That wasn't just some acquaintance. That wasn't just a friend. I felt my hands shake as I gripped the cart. It wasn't just the shock of seeing them together. It was the crushing realization that she was still hiding something from me. And whatever it was bigger than I had imagined. I didn't follow them. I couldn't. I was too far gone, too lost in the haze of confusion and betrayal. But the questions were louder now, pounding in my head like a drumbeat I couldn't ignore. Who was he? How long had this been going on? And why the hell wouldn't she tell me the truth? I spent the rest of the evening staring at the walls, replaying that moment over and over in my mind. The way she smiled at him, how she leaned in when he spoke to her. It was as if I had become a ghost in my own life, watching the woman I loved slip further away with each passing second. I tried to distract myself, to focus on anything else. I picked up my phone, scrolled through work emails, watched some mindless TV, but none of it worked. Every thought led back to her, to him, to the way I had no idea who my wife really was anymore. When she came home, she was late, later than usual, and she had that same look on her face, the one she wore whenever she was trying to hide something. Her eyes were downcast, her steps slower, like she was bracing for a storm. "Hey," I said, my voice tight. How was your day? She looked up, startled for a second, then gave me the kind of smile she'd been using for weeks now. Too perfect, too rehearsed. It was fine, she replied, avoiding my eyes. Just work stuff. Long day. I wasn't buying it. Where were you earlier? I saw you. She froze, a flash of panic passing over her features before she quickly masked it with a calm expression. What do you mean? I stepped closer, my voice quieter now, but firmer. I saw you today, Sarah. At the grocery store. With him. Her breath hitched, just for a moment, but it was enough. Enough for me to know that I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't overreacting. She had been with him. She started, then stopped herself. It's not what you think. I could feel the anger building inside me, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't interested in excuses anymore. Then what is it, Sarah? Who is he? She swallowed hard, her fingers trembling slightly as she tugged at the sleeves of her sweater. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. I told you, she whispered finally, her voice barely audible. I'll tell you everything. Just, not yet. Please. Why not now? I demanded, stepping back, my frustration bubbling over. What's stopping you? Why can't you tell me the truth? She shook her head slowly, as if trying to gather the words that would make it better. I can't. Not like this. I felt the anger well up again, but I didn't let it take control. Instead, I took a deep breath and asked the question I had been avoiding. How long, Sarah? How long has this been going on? She closed her eyes, but didn't answer. She didn't have to. I could see it in her face, the guilt, the regret, but also something else, something darker. I didn't know who he was yet, but I was beginning to understand the depth of her betrayal. And that feeling, the one I couldn't shake, grew stronger by the second. The silence stretched on longer than I expected. Sarah stood there, her arms wrapped tightly around herself like she was trying to hold something together that was already breaking. I wanted to scream, to demand every last shred of truth from her, but I didn't. I couldn't. There was something in the way she looked at me, like she was already seeing the end of it all. Please, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Just wait. I can't do this right now. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. The woman I thought I knew was slipping further away with each passing moment, and all I could do was stand there, waiting for her to make the next move. I had no choice but to walk away. She wasn't ready to give me the answers I needed, and I wasn't going to force her. But that feeling, this unbearable weight in my chest, was still there. I couldn't let go of it. Later that night, I sat in the living room, staring at the walls. It felt like the house was closing in on me, like everything that had once felt safe was now foreign, alien. Even the familiar hum of the refrigerator sounded different. I was so close to the truth, and yet it was just out of reach. I needed to know who he was. I needed to hear it from her, to hear it straight from her lips. But there was something in the way she hesitated, something in the way she couldn't look me in the eye, that told me she was keeping something from me. Something big. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think straight. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my coat and walked out the door. The night air was cold, but I didn't care. I needed to clear my head. I didn't know where I was going, but my feet carried me anyway. I passed by the park, then the coffee shop, and ended up in front of the one place I couldn't avoid anymore, the place where it all started. The house where Sarah had gone that day, where I had seen her walk in with him. I didn't know what I expected to find, but I had to see it for myself. I couldn't just keep wondering. Not anymore. I stood across the street for a long time, watching the windows of the house. The lights were off now, but I kept looking, waiting. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, but in that moment, I knew I was desperate. I couldn't live like this, in this limbo, forever. The door opened again, and I saw him. For the first time, I saw his face, and everything inside me froze. I should have turned around right then. I should have walked away, let the night swallow the image of him, but I couldn't. My feet were planted, my body numb. There he was, standing in the doorway, and everything about him felt like a punch to the gut. I knew him. I didn't recognize him at first, not in the way I had imagined. But once I saw his face, once I saw the way he moved, how easily he stepped outside, how he didn't hesitate to lock the door behind him, it all clicked. He was someone from our past. A name, a face, buried beneath years of memories. He wasn't just some stranger. He was someone who had known Sarah before me. My pulse quickened as he stood there, adjusting the collar of his coat, like he was about to leave. He didn't notice me. I wasn't even sure he'd ever look my way. My mind raced. I thought I understood the betrayal, but this was different. This was someone she had once loved. Someone who mattered to her, who had been there before me. And now, he was here, in the present, making his way into the life I thought was mine. I watched him walk down the driveway, his footsteps slow and deliberate. I couldn't move, couldn't look away. I didn't know if I was angry or devastated. All I knew was that the man I'd seen walking away wasn't just the shadow of my wife's past. He was her future. Or, at least, he was the man she wanted it to be. I had to leave, but my feet didn't move. My mind was stuck on one thing. Why hadn't Sarah told me? Why had she kept this from me, from the moment it started? I stood there, paralyzed, as he got into his car and drove off. I watched the taillights fade into the distance, and for a moment, I almost felt relieved. But then, the fear settled in. The gnawing fear that I had just stepped into something much bigger than I could have ever imagined. I turned and walked back to my car, every step feeling heavier than the last. I couldn't confront Sarah yet. Not until I understood everything. Not until I knew who I was dealing with. But what did that even mean anymore? The man who had just left her house. He wasn't just someone from her past. He was part of the lie I had been living in. And I had to figure out what that meant for the future. I couldn't go home right away. Not after seeing him. The image of his face, the realization that he was someone from her past, kept playing in my mind like a loop I couldn't stop. I needed space, air, anything to clear my head. So I drove. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed distance. I ended up in a park, the same park I used to visit alone when I needed to think. It was quiet, empty. The silence settled over me like a blanket, but the weight in my chest wouldn't lift. I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen. I thought about calling Sarah, demanding answers. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I found myself scrolling through old photos. Pictures from a time before all this, when we were happy, when I thought I knew her. They felt like relics from someone else's life, someone I didn't recognize anymore. I closed the phone, but the questions didn't stop. Who was he? How long had this been going on? Was I just blind to it all? I couldn't ignore it anymore, but I couldn't face it either. After a while, I drove home, not sure what I would find. I parked in the driveway, staring at the front door. It was the same door I'd walked through hundreds of times, but now it felt like an entrance to a stranger's life. I stayed in the car for a long moment, trying to steady my thoughts. When I finally stepped inside, Sarah was on the couch, the TV playing in the background. She looked at me briefly, her face guarded. "Where were you?" she asked, almost too casually. I didn't answer. I just stood there, taking her in, waiting for her to explain. But the silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, as if neither of us knew where to start. She was waiting for me to speak, but I couldn't find the words. Not yet. Not until I knew everything. The quiet in the room felt like a trap. Sarah was sitting there, her eyes on the screen, but I knew she wasn't really watching. She was waiting for me to break the silence. But I couldn't. I couldn't find the words that would make everything feel okay again. Finally, she glanced at me, her face unreadable. "You're angry." I let out a breath, shaking my head. "Angry," I repeated. "No, I'm not angry. I'm trying to understand." She looked away, her fingers tracing the edges of the couch. She knew what I was talking about. She knew exactly why I was standing there, barely holding it together. "You saw him, didn't you?" she said quietly. I didn't answer right away. What could I say? I wanted to yell, to demand every last shred of truth from her, but I was afraid. Afraid that if I pushed too hard, I would lose whatever was left between us. "Yes," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I saw you with him." She sighed, a sound that was part relief, part regret. She seemed to shrink into herself, like she was trying to disappear. "I never meant for you to find out like this," she said, her voice cracking. "You never meant for me to find out?" I asked, incredulous. "How long, Sarah? How long have you been seeing him?" She hesitated, her eyes not meeting mine. "It's not what you think," she said again, her voice thin. I shook my head. "Don't do that. Don't tell me it's not what I think. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw how you were with him." She pressed her palms into her eyes, like she was trying to block out what I was saying. I didn't want it to happen. I didn't plan for it to get this far. I felt the anger rise in me again, but I pushed it down. "How far, Sarah? How far did this go? What am I supposed to believe?" I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice full of guilt. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep it from you. Keep it from me? I repeated. You didn't think I would notice? You didn't think it would catch up to you? She stood up, moving toward me, her eyes pleading. Please, just let me explain. It's complicated. I didn't know how to stop it. Stop it. I almost laughed, bitterly. You never stopped it. And now, I don't know who you are anymore. I turned away, stepping back. She reached for me, but I couldn't let her touch me. Not now. I wasn't sure if I ever could again. I didn't want to look at her. I didn't want to hear any more of her excuses, her half-formed apologies. The words felt like knives, cutting into me, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. I couldn't understand how we had gotten here, how I had failed to see the cracks in the walls that were now crumbling around us. She took a tentative step toward me, but I couldn't move. I never wanted to hurt you, she said again, her voice shaking. I never thought it would get this far. I turned, cutting her off. You thought it wouldn't get this far? That's what you're telling me? My voice was rising now, the frustration too much to hold back. How long has it been going on, Sarah? Weeks? Months? Or was it even before that? Her eyes welled up, but she didn't answer. She couldn't. It was too late for words. She had already said enough. The silence that had been growing between us, the distance that I had ignored for so long, was now suffocating me. And she was right there, her presence too close, too distant at the same time. I thought you'd be okay with it, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought we could both move on, but I couldn't. Not really. You thought I'd be okay with it? I repeated, stunned. That I would just accept this? That I would let you have him and still stay here like nothing had changed? She reached out again, but I took a step back, my hands shaking at my sides. I don't know what to do anymore, Sarah, I said, my voice trembling with disbelief. You're asking me to accept this, and I don't know how. I don't want you to accept it, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared of losing you. Her words hung in the air, but they didn't comfort me. If anything, they made it worse. She was afraid of losing me, but she had already lost me. How could I go back to the way things were when everything had already been broken? I don't know if I can stay here, I said finally, my voice raw. I don't know if I can look at you the same way again. She started to cry then, the tears streaming down her face, but I couldn't console her. I couldn't make it better. I wasn't sure there was anything that could fix this. Not anymore. I stood there, staring at her, feeling the distance between us grow even wider. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew, had become a stranger. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't sure I wanted to find her again. I couldn't stand the tears. They were an accusation, a reminder of how far we had fallen, and every drop felt like a weight in my chest. She was sorry, but that didn't fix anything. I didn't know what would. Maybe nothing could. I don't know if I can keep doing this, I said, my voice quiet, but firm. I don't know how to pretend that nothing's wrong when everything's shattered. Sarah's face crumpled, and she sank back onto the couch, clutching the cushion like it could hold her together. I stood by the door, unsure of what to do next. I couldn't stay here, not with this new reality crushing the space between us, but I didn't know where to go either. Please, she whispered. Don't leave. Not like this. I looked at her, and for a moment, the guilt surged through me. I loved her. I did. But everything felt hollow now, like I was living in the aftermath of something that had already died. I don't know how to fix this, I muttered. How do I even begin to trust you again? She reached for me, but I stepped back, not out of spite, but because I couldn't let her touch me right now. The touch that once meant safety, comfort, now felt like a betrayal. I needed space. I needed clarity. I never wanted to hurt you, she said again, her voice barely audible. But it didn't matter anymore. The words were empty, like a story I'd heard too many times. You've already hurt me, I said. You've been hurting me for who knows how long, and I didn't even see it. Her eyes flashed with a mix of guilt and something darker, something I couldn't quite understand. It wasn't like that, she said, but I could tell by the way her voice broke that she knew it was. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. She was crying now, softly, but it didn't matter. The truth was out. The distance had been there for months, years, maybe, and I had ignored it, pretended it wasn't happening. I had let us drift apart, too afraid to face what was already breaking. I need some time, I said, my voice distant. She nodded, her tears still flowing, but I couldn't console her. I couldn't even console myself. There was nothing left to say. I walked out of the room and into the cold, empty night. The house behind me was silent, but I knew nothing would be the same when I returned. The night air felt sharp, biting, as I walked down the street. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay in that house with Sarah. I needed space. I needed time. But more than anything, I needed to breathe without the weight of her lies pressing down on me. I wandered through the neighborhood, aimlessly, trying to make sense of everything, but nothing made sense. The past few weeks, the moments I thought were ours, felt like they belonged to someone else. I couldn't stop thinking about him, the man I had seen her with, the one she had let into her life without me even knowing. Why didn't she tell me? Was it guilt that kept her from being honest? Or was it something more? I passed by a small park, the same one I used to go to when I needed to clear my mind, and sat on a bench, staring at the empty swings in the distance. It was quiet here, peaceful, but I couldn't escape the storm inside my head. The more I thought about it, the more the anger grew, until it consumed me, until I couldn't remember what it felt like to be calm. I reached for my phone. I almost called her, but I didn't. I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. Instead, I opened my messages and found a name I hadn't thought of in years. A friend from college, someone who always had a way of talking sense into me when I needed it. I tapped the contact, and without thinking, I typed a simple message. I need to talk. The reply came a minute later. Where are you? I looked up at the stars, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. I'm fine. Just not at home. Come over, he replied. You don't have to be alone with this. I hesitated. But the truth was, I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to be stuck in my own head, stuck in a house with the woman who had broken me. I typed my reply. I'm on my way. I didn't know if talking to him would help, but I didn't have many options left. I had to do something. I couldn't just keep running. I pulled up to my friend's house, the one place I thought I could find some clarity. I hadn't seen him in a while, but he was one of those people you could always count on. The kind who wouldn't ask too many questions, just listen, and maybe help you find some answers. I parked the car and sat for a moment, staring at the headlights in the rearview mirror. Part of me was still back at home, in that room, watching Sarah cry, seeing the way she had looked at me when she said, I didn't mean to hurt you. But I was done listening to her apologies. I was done waiting for her to fix something that might already be beyond repair. When I knocked on the door, he opened it quickly, as if he had been waiting for me. He didn't say anything at first, just stepped aside to let me in. We sat down in his living room, the silence between us heavy. I could feel the weight of everything pressing on my chest, but I wasn't sure where to start. How do you explain that the woman you thought you knew, the woman you loved, has been hiding something from you for who knows how long? How do you admit that you're standing at the edge of something you can't control, knowing it's all falling apart? I don't know what to do, man, I said, finally breaking the silence. I don't even know who I am anymore. He didn't offer me any empty words of comfort. He just listened, nodding occasionally, as if trying to understand the gravity of what I was saying. I told him everything. About Sarah's distance, the texts, the walk, seeing her with him, all of it. The more I said, the more I realized how deep the hurt ran. I had been blind to the cracks, too scared to see them until it was too late. After a long pause, he spoke. You've got to decide what you want. Do you want to fix it, or do you want to walk away? I sat there for a moment, trying to understand the question. Could I fix it? Could I ever trust her again? Or had everything that had been between us crumbled beyond repair? I don't know if I can fix it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I even want to. His eyes softened, but he didn't push. He knew, as I did, that sometimes the hardest thing to do is to let go, even when you know it's the only way forward. I stayed at his place for a while, not talking much, just sitting with the weight of my thoughts. But as the night turned to morning, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep pretending. I had to face the reality that Sarah and I were no longer the people we had been. We were different, and maybe it was time to accept that. When I finally went back home, the house felt emptier than it ever had before. I didn't know what the next step was, but I knew I couldn't keep living in the past. The woman I had loved was gone, and the man she had been with had already taken his place. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if Sarah and I can ever find a way back to each other. But I do know that the truth is always harder to live with than the lies. And sometimes, the hardest part is facing the things you never wanted to see.